Outlander just gave us one of the most emotional finales I've ever seen, and honestly, I still can't stop thinking about that ending. Because the final episode didn't just answer questions. It completely changed the way we look at Jaime, Claire, the Stones, and even the very first episode of the series. From Jaime's shocking fate on the battlefield to Claire's terrifying transformation. And from the truth about the ghost to the heartbreaking meaning behind the forget-me-nots. Episode 10 felt less like a finale, and more like the closing of a circle that started years ago. But the craziest part is that I don't think most people realized how many hidden details were packed into those final moments. There are scenes in this episode that completely recontextualize the entire story of Outlander. And once you connect all the pieces together, the ending becomes even more emotional. So today we're going to break down Jaime's death, Claire's powers, the ghost mystery that's been haunting fans since season 1, and the real meaning behind those flowers near the stones. And trust me, the deeper you look into this finale, the sadder and more beautiful it becomes. The episode begins with an atmosphere that already feels wrong in the best possible way. You can tell something terrible is coming long before it actually happens. Outlander has always been a show about fate, and this season spent almost every episode reminding us that Jaime's death was getting closer and closer. Frank's warning stayed in the background the entire time like a ticking clock nobody could stop. And what made it even more painful is that Jaime himself finally accepted it. That's the part that destroyed me emotionally, because for the first time in a long time, Jaime wasn't fighting destiny anymore. He genuinely believed his end had arrived. You can see it in the way he talks to Claire, the way he looks at his family, and especially the way he prepares everything before leaving for battle. He writes his will like a man who already knows he isn't coming home. He leaves his land to Brianna, says goodbye to everyone quietly, and even gives William his Bible and whiskey. And I'm not gonna lie, that moment hit me harder than I expected because it felt like Jaime was trying to leave pieces of himself behind for the people he loved most. What makes the William scene even more heartbreaking is the fact that their relationship never fully healed. There was still distance between them, still pain, still words left unsaid. So when Jaime leaves him those personal belongings, it almost feels like his final attempt to reach his son even after death. And knowing William, if he ever truly understands what that gesture meant, it's going to emotionally destroy him. But what makes the writing in this episode so brilliant is that it tricks both the characters and the audience into believing fate can actually be defeated. When Jaime survives the battle at first, there's this sudden feeling of relief. For a few seconds, it genuinely feels like he escaped death itself. Even Jaime starts smiling. You can actually see hope return to him. And honestly, I think that moment was intentionally designed to make viewers lower their guard, because right after giving us relief, the episode completely shatters it. General Ferguson shooting Jaime came out of nowhere, and the reason it worked so well is because the scene happens when Jaime finally thinks the nightmare is over. That's what makes it tragic. He wasn't prepared anymore. Emotionally, he had already crossed the finish line. And then suddenly everything gets ripped away in seconds. The moment Jaime falls honestly felt unreal. I kept expecting him to stand back up because my brain simply refused to accept what I was seeing. But then Claire feels his pain instantly, and that's when the scene becomes devastating. The connection between them has always been one of the core themes of Outlander, but this episode takes it to another level entirely. Claire feeling Jaime's death before even seeing him proves they are connected in a way that goes beyond normal love. It's almost spiritual at this point. And when she runs toward him and finds him lying there motionless, the grief on her face says everything before she even speaks. The show lets the silence do the work, and honestly, that silence hurt more than any dialogue could have. What really stayed with me though is the way Claire reacts afterward. She doesn't completely break down immediately. Instead, it feels like part of her refuses to accept reality. And that denial becomes incredibly important later in the episode. Because Claire has spent her entire life trying to save people. She's a healer. That's who she is at her core. So when the one person she cannot imagine living without dies in front of her, her mind almost treats it like a challenge fate itself has given her. The episode quietly starts hinting that something impossible might happen. The camera keeps focusing on Claire differently. The atmosphere changes around her. Even the way other characters speak to her starts feeling distant. almost like the world itself is holding its breath. And meanwhile Jaime's body remains there, cold and lifeless, while Claire refuses to leave his side. That entire sequence during the night genuinely gave me chills because it felt like the boundary between life and death was slowly disappearing. Outlander has always mixed history with mystery, but this finale leans harder into the supernatural than ever before. Claire lying beside Jaime through the night almost feels ritualistic, like she's pouring every remaining piece of herself into him. And the craziest part is that the episode never fully explains how she does it. We just slowly realize that Claire is sacrificing something massive in order to bring him back. Then comes the scene that honestly might be one of the most unforgettable moments in the entire series. Claire's hair turns completely white. The second that happened, everything clicked for me. The Cherokee woman's words finally paid off. Claire had reached her full potential. Not as a doctor, not as a time traveler, but as someone capable of changing fate itself. And I love that the show never frames it like magic or cheap fantasy. Instead, it feels emotional, personal, painful. Claire didn't resurrect Jaime because she had powers like some superhero. She brought him back because her love for him was stronger than the destiny that tried to separate them. And when Jaime finally opens his eyes and takes that breath at the end, I swear I got goosebumps all over again. Because in that moment, Outlander basically tells us that their connection transcends time, death, and history itself. The most mind-blowing part of the finale honestly has to be Jaime's ghost, because this is a mystery that Outlander fans have been talking about since the very first episode aired. For years, people kept asking the same question. Why was Jaime's ghost standing outside Claire's window in Inverness before she ever traveled through the stones? At first, it seemed impossible to explain because Jaime was born hundreds of years in the past. So how could his ghost appear there before their story even began? Well, episode 10 finally gives us the answer, and somehow it's even sadder than I imagined. Before Jaime rides toward battle, he tells Claire something that sounded beautiful at first, but becomes heartbreaking once you realize what it truly means. He says he'll grin and abide his time in purgatory, until she joins him. That line isn't random dialogue. It's the key to understanding the entire ghost mystery. Jaime already knows deep down that death may not be the end for him. And after watching the finale carefully, I honestly believe we finally witnessed the exact moment Jaime's spirit wandered through time for the very first time. What makes the scene genius is that the show hides the truth in plain sight. When Jaime's ghost appears near Claire, he looks young again. That detail is incredibly important. If this spirit came from the Battle of King's Mountain after the resurrection, he would have looked older. But he doesn't. He looks exactly like the Jaime Claire first fell in love with. Which means this isn't some future version of Jaime visiting her. This is the same ghost from season 1. We were literally watching the beginning of the loop that started the entire series. And once I realized that, the scene hit me on a completely different emotional level. What makes it even more tragic is the idea that Jaime's spirit has always been tied to Claire across time. Even before she traveled through the stones, part of him was already searching for her. The show basically confirms that their love story was destined from the beginning. Not in a cheesy romantic way, but in a haunting way. A painful way. Jaime's soul itself refused to let Claire disappear from his life. And honestly, the way the episode presents this reveal is beautiful, because it doesn't over-explain anything. It trusts the audience to connect the pieces. After appearing near Claire, Jaime's ghost walks toward the stones. And this is where the finale becomes truly emotional. He touches the ground near Craig Na Dun, and suddenly forget-me-nots begin blooming beside the stones. The second that happened, I knew the show had just connected itself back to episode 1 in the most heartbreaking way possible. Those flowers were never random. They were never just decoration. Jaime placed them there himself. Or more specifically, his spirit did. And once you understand that, Claire's entire journey changes forever. Back in the very first episode, Claire notices those flowers while walking near the stones. They catch her attention. They pull her closer. And eventually she returns alone, which leads to her traveling through time and meeting Jaime. But now we know that none of that happened by accident. Jaime guided her there himself. The reason this revelation hurts so much emotionally is because it shows how desperately Jaime wanted Claire to find him again. Think about it for a second. After dying at Culloden, Jaime believed he would lose Claire forever. But even death wasn't enough to stop him from reaching out to her. He knew how much she loved botany. He knew she would notice the flowers. So he left behind the one thing that could quietly guide her back toward the stones. That's not just romance anymore. That's sacrifice. That's devotion on a level that honestly feels impossible to describe. And suddenly the name Forget-Me-Not becomes devastatingly meaningful. Right before the battle, Jaime asks Claire to remember him. At the time, the line sounds tragic because he thinks he's about to die. But by the end of the episode, those words gain an entirely new meaning. The flowers themselves become a message from Jaime to Claire across time and death. Don't forget me. Find me again. And the craziest thing is she did. Everything that happened in Outlander started because Jaime refused to let fate separate them. The stones alone might never have brought Claire back. She could have ignored them completely. But the flowers drew her in emotionally. They made her curious enough to return. Which means Jaime's ghost didn't just visit Claire in Inverness. He actively created the chain of events that led to their entire love story happening in the first place.